Hi, Peter Charles here of Hooked for Life Fly Fishing. And in this video, let's look at something a little different. We'll look at fishing wet flies deep. Now, normally we associate wet flies with being at the surface or close to the surface. We're talking about emerging insects with wet flies usually. But there are reasons why we might want to fish them deep as well. So let's look at the first example here. This is a little spot on the west branch of the Osable River in New York State. And I was over here on this bank right here, and I was fishing a Caddis emerger that I had produced to sit right in the surface film. It's a surface pattern with just a little, it's like a clink hammer sort of fly, with just a little post sticking up. And there were, you could see fish working, and I could also see the odd sporadic rise, but not much was happening, and I wasn't getting anything. But I could see that odd little flash under the surface, but they didn't seem to be on the bottom. They seemed to be about halfway up. So I swapped out the leader, soaked the fly really well, cast it upstream, let it sink, brought it along, and bang, fish on, just like that. And I ended up getting like, I don't know, 4 or 5, 6 after that. So it pointed out to me that these caddis were actually emerging much lower down in the water column, and then they were swimming up using their wings to get to the surface. And I later saw that type of behavior. And this is one of the reasons why I produced my diving caddis, was to imitate two things: the egg layer primarily, which dives down and swims back up, but also does a good job of imitating this lower down emergence. So that's one reason, caddis. But we also get into other reasons too for wanting to get a wet fly down deep. Now, one of the more common reasons is we're using it as a searching pattern. And as a searching pattern, you often have to get it down because it just doesn't seem to work very well otherwise. We might be imitating that up and down motion we get out of mayfly nymphs when their bodies fill with gas and they try to swim back down to the rocks, and then they float back up, swim back down, and a lot of fish will take them in that particular mode as well before they get to the surface. And the other thing too is a lot of little flies, little wet flies like this guy right here, right, that one right there, and this one up here, they imitate little bait fish. So you fish them low as little bait fish. And you can do that too. So let's look at some of the stuff I've got here to help get our flies down, and we'll look at some other methods as well. Well, I've already discussed using fluorocarbon to help sink wet flies down. We can look at using a bit of split shot on the leader, nothing wrong with that. We could put beads on our wet flies. You could tie a wet fly with a little tiny tungsten bead on the front. That'll work. If you're using a floater line like this one, you could always attach a short poly leader. There are limits to how deep you'll be able to get it. It'll depend on current and the drag of your fly and other things. There are also some sink tip systems out there that are available for use on trout-sized single-hand 9-foot rods. But what I prefer to do is, I've got an intermediate here and a type 3 here. I prefer to use sinking lines if I want to get my wet fly down lower. And that works really well for keeping the fly down, because with sink tips, as you go in, and poly leaders, when you go from slow to fast currents, your fly can come up. Or as you go from fast to slow, your fly can drop and you'll snag. So, it's not always the easiest method. So first, I'm going to look at our use of mending here. You combine a mending with I'll stop it right here. You saw that pullback mend, and you'll notice my line stayed nice and tight. There was tension right down to the fly. That was slow motion, but just that smooth lift over. And now watch what I do with the rod. I drop the rod down towards the fly, keeping tension all the time, but light tension, and that sinks the fly. So this is a great way, just with a simple mend, to get your fly further down. And that's basically all I was doing in that situation in the Osable River, was casting upstream with a reach mend and then just dropping tension and keeping the fly down. It worked like a charm. So, if you couple you know, a fluorocarbon leader or maybe a little bit of split shot with that pullback mend, you can really get a fly down quite well. You also got some other choices as well when it comes to trying to do this. There's other ways to manage your line. One of the ways is to keep your casting angle narrow. Now I want to stop this one right here, but that you can see that fish in the middle of the picture right there. If that's the same fish, I caught that guy about a week before. He's about 18-inch brown. That fish was taking those sporadic emergers in the middle of the water column. That was a mayfly hatch going on, and it wasn't much of one. And that fish was nailing the ones that were going up to the surface, but they weren't getting there. He was getting them before they got up there. So the small fish were breaking the surface when they were taking the emergers. This bigger fish didn't, stayed down the entire time. So that's sort of an indication of what's going on, that when you're getting into these hatches. Now let's talk about that mayfly emergence, where they go up and down with the gas in their bodies. Right now I'm just nymphing. There's no hatches going on of any kind. So this is just a Euro nymph situation. But I could tie on a flymph with a bit of weight, and I could be doing this with my rod tip, keeping nice, slow enough that I'm keeping contact with the fly, letting it drop, bringing it up. And this particular run is perfect because I'm on the inside of the bend. So I could do that all the way through the run. So if you've got a hatch going on, but you're not seeing any rises to dries, that's something you can do. Now, this particular one is about the casting angle. I've got a fast bit of water out there. I cast relatively about 60 degrees, and I'm using an intermediate line. And I just swing it over, and when it gets into the soft water, I strip it in, and then pick it out, back up, and put it back out again. Works like a charm. And this is how you would work a sinking line, with shallow angle casts, and being able to just bring that fly across nice and slowly. In that case, I was after bass. I think I was using a small woolly bugger, if I remember correctly. But the whole idea is just narrow angle cast in fast water, bring it across with a sinking line, and it'll come across quite slowly. Because one of the things you want to do when you're presenting a wet fly under a fast current, you need to slow it down. You can't have this thing whipping across the current, because that's unnatural. Insects don't go 100 miles an hour like motorboats through the water. So you really do need to slow it down, and that's where the sinking line comes in to play, because it moves more slowly because it's down below the fast currents. And, so if you're presenting deep, either the type 3 or the intermediate, depending on the flow rate, works fine. You combine that with fluorocarbon leader, and even one of these that are not weighted, even on a fluorocarbon leader with a sinking line, they'll get down just fine. So you do have some choices. Just remember, when you're out there and you're looking at an emergence going on, and you're not seeing much surface action, the odd sporadic one here and there, but you see a flash here and there, that's an indication that they're taking part the way out the water column, whether it's caddis or mayflies. So that's when we want to get our emerger, our wet flies down. And so, make a choice, whatever works for you in the scenario, the weighted fly, the split shot, just using mending with a fluorocarbon leader, however you want to do it. But keep in mind, don't be just focused on that, top of the water type of presentation. Be prepared to get that wet fly down as well. So keep that in mind. Cheers.